9th, 2021, that's when the press release hit our inboxes. Ford restructures India operations. Basically, Ford was pulling out of India after 2 decades. After nearly $2 billion in accumulated losses, Ford said enough is enough. They packed their bags and left India. Except that turns out is a short-term move, because now, 2.5 years later, Ford is planning to come back to India, and they're coming back to India with this SUV. Not this exact SUV, but they're coming back with the Endeavour. Okay, might not even be called Endeavour, because going by recent reports on social media, it'll be called the Everest, but the Endeavour is coming back. And in this episode, we're going to look back at the Ford Endeavour, what made it so enduring. This is Gone But Not Forgotten on the Ford Endeavour. The Endeavour was launched with a 2.5-litre Mazda Source diesel, after which this facelift arrived. It got Hurricane stickers on the side, a ladder and a mirror at the back, a DVD player in the cabin, and a 3-litre common rail diesel, now making 154 bhp and 380 Newton meters. The distinguishing factor from the second facelift ND that came later in 2010 are these boxy headlights and the larger grille. Of course, this ND is a white one with black tints, has a minister's plaque at the front and VVIP number plates. The Endeavour was launched at 15.29 lakhs and went up to 17.38 lakhs for the full-blown 4x4 of this generation. I know we featured the Endeavour before on Gone But Not Forgotten, but that was a Ford Gone But Not Forgotten, where we got everything. The Fiesta, the Mustang, the Mondeo, the EcoSport, the Icon, everything. All of them are together. This one is focused purely on the Endeavour. Now, this one, there's a lot of debate about whether this was the Gen 1 or the Gen 2. This is not the Gen 2. This is one of the many facelifts on the Gen 1. The Gen 1 first came with the rectangular headlamps. Then there was a facelift. In the second facelift, the headlamps were changed to something that didn't look as macho as in your face. Obviously, in this particular example, you can't make that out because it's got these aftermarket off-road bumpers. It also has an Ironman suspension with a 2-inch lift kit. So it looks a little different from the regular Endeavour. But a lot of enthusiasts, they went out and modified their Endeavours. Even the newer versions, the Gen 2, which we had in India, a lot of those were modified. And fact is, the Endeavour was bought by a little more enthusiastic crowd than the Fortuner. In terms of capability, both were almost the same. In fact, when we compared the Fortuner to the Endeavour back when both were contemporary, we actually rated the Endeavour above the Fortuner. Better in terms of ride, better in terms of handling, and a lot of people preferred the styling of the Endeavour compared to the Fortuner. So let's get going. This, like I said, is one of the many facelifts on the Gen 1. And the Gen 1, as the engine size went up from 2.5 to 3 litre, it also got very macho sounding suffixes. Hurricane, Thunder, Thunder Plus even. This Endeavour is something that I'm actually very familiar with. My father-in-law, he had the same Endeavour with the 3-litre diesel engine, the automatic gearbox, and that one was used like a beast. That was a workhorse. Our farmhouse outside of Pune, that was built because of the Endeavour. Every day the Endeavour would go up and down with material, feed for the cattle, stuff for the farm, stuff for the house, building material, everything. It was used like an absolute truck, and it was so reliable. I think that was used for like 2.5 lakh kilometers and no problems at all. This one is done 1,39,000 kilometers, and the owner says zero problems, no issues at all with it. The other Endeavours also, nobody really complains about quality, anything going wrong, reliability. Nobody complains about it with an Endeavour. Any generation of Endeavour. You can complain about the leaf springs and the bouncy ride and all of that, but breaking down, not with the Endeavour. These were built on pickup platforms, and a pickup being a commercial vehicle, it just had to keep running. This diesel engine put out 153 bhp, 380 Newton meters of torque. So not much power, to be honest, but it could cruise at 100 kilometers per hour, which was all the cruising speed that you actually wanted to do, because this had the leaf springs at the rear, and leaf springs are not the best idea for dynamics. In fact, that leaf springs could get you into a lot of trouble if you weren't careful. If you were too aggressive with it, if you're trying to do some sideways nonsense with it, that could really fling you across. So that is something that you had to be really careful with. And the Endeavour was also pretty bouncy. Even today, with the better suspension on it, it's still quite a bouncy thing. At speed on the highway, it is all over the place. This is something that you drive a little bit under the limit, but in terms of its sheer cruising ability, it can keep chugging along without a problem. The automatic gearbox, an old school 5-speed automatic gearbox, not the quickest in terms of shifts, not very dynamic, but again, very reliable. You could use this, there would be zero problems with it. So it was all built for reliability, built for longevity, and in that sense, it definitely worked. In terms of the interiors, not much to talk about, but also remember this is nearly a 20-year-old design. So in those days, not much was expected of our SUVs. For instance, nobody really expected a sunroof. So what the top-end variants of the Endeavour got was this screen. It folded down from the roof. It looks a little aftermarket, but that's what it got. You would get your infotainment. This is obviously an upgraded infotainment. You got this silver finish on the center console, a bit of wood to give it premiumness. Obviously, that is plaster wood, but anything that looked like wood was premium in those days, so that's what you got. You also got this two-tone beige leather seats, and actually very comfortable seat, so beige and black, so that also gave it a little bit more premium feel. So small little touches, leather wrapped steering wheel, a very big steering wheel, but a nice leather wrapped steering wheel, and the quality is so good that on this vehicle, which is probably 18 years old, there's still no cracks in the leather. So actually a very good quality and put together very well. Those days, obviously, you didn't have a digital speedo and all of that. You got regular dials. In fact, if you had a tachometer, that was a big deal. You had to be happy with just having a tachometer, and it got a tachometer. This also got a proper 4x4 powertrain with 4-low. And in terms of the off-road ability, okay, this is no Gypsy. It has got a long wheelbase, but then a Gypsy you can't drive from, say, Delhi to Bombay, whereas an Endeavour you could drive from Delhi to Bombay, and then you could also do a fair bit of off-roading with it. This is as heavy as it looks. This is a massive beast, so you really can't take your liberties with it. You have to drive it at 8 tenths, not 10 tenths. And that is something that Ford actually realized when they went and did an upgrade, a whole new generation of the Endeavour. In 2016-17 came the Gen 2 Endeavour, and everything was changed. This was completely new. It had a new ladder frame chassis. The styling was a world away from the old Endeavour. Still very butch, very macho, very in your face, but also considerably more refined, more sophisticated. It came with 2 engine options. The 2.2-liter engine made 155 bhp, 385 Newton meters of torque, but this is the other engine, the 3.2-liter 5-cylinder diesel engine, 197 bhp. So this was the performance benchmark. This actually came out a few months before the new Fortuner, and we actually loved it. This is the one that won those comparison tests against the Fortuner. It had really good ride, good space inside, very good interiors. For its time, this was a benchmark and then some. With the second generation Endeavour, Ford didn't make a leap of 1 generation. They made a leap of maybe 2, even 3 generations, because when you compare this to what went before it, this was completely, radically different. Let's start with the interiors. This was so much better, so much better. In terms of equipment, Ford threw everything at the Endeavour. So it's got these 2 digital screens flanking the central analog speedometer. It's got a really nice looking steering wheel that's really nice to hold. Touchscreen infotainment with wired CarPlay, nice climate control panel out here. It's got different off-road modes like a Land Rover. So it's got sand, it's got mud, it's got rock crawl, it's got proper fall low. Though that's activated by this small little button here, not a chunky knob. It even has automatic parking, nice gear lever, a proper handbrake. Unlike that lever that you used in the old Endeavour, a proper handbrake out here. It's got this half leather dash, black and beige, really nice comfy leather seats, electrically operated seats. It's got a panoramic sunroof, everything on it. Even today, 2024, this is still contemporary, both in terms of its design as well as in the way it has been put together and in the amount of equipment that it has. And this is also contemporary in the way it drives. So we got this rough patch of road here, and the way the ND is going over it, it's really impressive. And impressive compared to the Fortuner, obviously, because what's the rival? What do you compare this proper ladder frame SUV with? Only the Fortuner. The Fortuner is more bouncy than the Endeavour. This can properly handle, of course, properly handle compared to other ladder frame SUVs. This is no monocoque rival. But the ladder frame is what gives it that solidity, that ruggedness. You can throw it around with gay abandon and not worry about things falling apart. Not even worry about squeaks and rattles coming in. And I'm honestly surprised by how nice, even today, this is to drive. Of course, this 3.2 diesel engine, it's a big diesel engine and it is mega thirsty. You'll get 6 kmpl in the city, 7 kmpl on the highway with this automatic gearbox. So, if you want fuel efficiency, don't even bother coming here. This also is a bit noisy. Listen to it. But this is also decently quick. 197 bhp is no laughing matter, and this does get a nice move on. You don't have to struggle with it. Even the automatic gearbox, not sluggish, well suited to the character of the diesel engine. Actually nice. And more than the power, the torque. 470 Newton meters of torque. That's solid pulling power. Like properly solid pulling power. What also transformed the driving experience was the electric power steering. Making U-turns like this in the old Endeavour was a task and a half, whereas with the updated Gen 2 Endeavour, easy. You could almost drive it with one finger. I say almost because it didn't become too light. If it had become too light, like for instance the Scorpio, the new Scorpio, I think the steering is a bit too light, whereas this, in terms of the weighting and the balance between ease of driving and also convenience, it's perfect. It is longer than a Pajero, longer than the old Chevy Trailblazer that we used to have, longer than everything else. So it is a massive machine. Also very heavy, 2.3 tons. So it needs that power to haul ass, and it can haul ass when you ask it to. Now, I was saying in terms of equipment, Ford threw everything at it. That digital information screen, it's got a small little tachometer. It gives you your fuel gauge. It has got a distance to empty readout. It tells you about the power distribution. Like in the Mercedes GLS, the third row of seats could be electrically folded down into the boot. It also had this key system where you could program it, so you could limit, say, the top speed of it. You could even limit the volume on this really nice sound system. So if your kid took your Endeavour out, he couldn't get all the power on tap. He couldn't crank up the music all the way up. That was another cool touch. And that's something that I only just learned because Zubin, who owns this car, our intern, probably his dad did that to him. It even gives you the different off-road angles. And that brings me to off-roading. This actually can off-road pretty well. It is very capable. Of course, it is big, it is long, it is wide, it has got a very long wheelbase. So you've got to be aware of that when you're going over narrow trails. But all that considered, this can do a fair bit of off-roading. It is pretty capable. In fact, I remember that when they upgraded the Endeavour to the BS6 emission norms, they did the media drive in Rajasthan in the deserts. I didn't go for that drive, and that meant that I never got to drive the BS6 Endeavour. And that's the one that I'm now looking forward to drive. In 2020, we got COVID, and in 2020, we also got the new BS6 emission norms, and that meant a lot of manufacturers just completely abandoned diesel engines. Maruti moved towards full petrols. The entire Volkswagen group moved towards full petrols. Ford, they didn't can diesels altogether, but the 3.2 as well as the 2.2 diesel engines in the Endeavour had to be canned, and in came the new 2-liter Panther diesel engine. That's the one that we have in this example. And this example is special because the Ford guys told the owner that this is the last one, the last Endeavour to roll out of the lines in India before the factory was mothballed. No way of really verifying the claims, but this was bought a month after Ford shut shop, so this definitely is one of the last. So actually it is a very special piece. This also gets that 10-speed automatic gearbox, and honestly I haven't driven an Endeavour with the 10-speed automatic gearbox. When Ford did the media drives, it was in Rajasthan. I was out on holiday, and by the time it actually was on its way to come to Pune for our road test, Ford shut shop in India. So this is actually going to be the first time I'm driving the 2-liter with that 10-speed automatic gearbox. The 2-liter diesel engine was called Eco Blue. Eco obviously because it met the new BS6 emission norms, and blue for the AdBlue urea injection. In terms of power output, it was actually more powerful than the outgoing 2.2. So it made 168 bhp and 420 newton meters of torque. So 10 bhp more than the 2.2 and only 20 bhp down on the 3.2, the big 5-cylinder diesel engine. Also in terms of torque, it was only 50 newton meters down on the big 5-cylinder. So in terms of power and all of that, it was actually pretty competitive. And then it got the 8-speed, no, not 8-speed, 10-speed automatic transmission. 10 speeds in this automatic transmission. Now, I'll talk about that in a bit. In terms of refinement, it's actually very good. And when you step on it, it really does move without struggling and without creating like a volcano of noise. So actually the powertrain is pretty good. Now, in terms of the manual mode, it's got these buttons out here, so you can use that to downshift, upshift. Hey, looking at those numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Man, how many gears are there in this gearbox? And one thing I have to say is that driving this, it takes some time to get used to because this gearbox is constantly shifting gears. It's constantly, because there's so many gears, so it's constantly going up and down, up and down, up and down. Like you can see now 7, 8, 7, 8. 10 is not going to get also on these roads. You need an open highway for the 10 gear. Now it's down to 6. So it's constantly shifting gears. I guess after a while you'll get to ignore that. It's a good thing that this is a refined gearbox and you don't feel any jerks and all of that. But others is just way too much. A 10-speed automatic gearbox, especially in our Indian traffic conditions, it just does not work. But the benefit is that this 2-liter diesel engine did give better fuel economy than both the 2.2 and 110% better than the 3.2 diesel engine. Refinement, like I said, is very nice. And of course, apart from that, Ford really didn't need to do anything else to the Endeavour. So in terms of the styling, the grille was a different design and the headlamps got LEDs. But apart from that, it all looked the same. The interiors were the same. I think some stitching colors changed and this wood panel, the color changed. But apart from that, everything else is the same. And like I said, it didn't really need any changes. Why fix it if it ain't broke? This one was very popular, people really loved it, and this was one of the most popular Ford models. Of course, in terms of volume, this was not the best selling, because the price of the Endeavour had gone up. So there were two versions, the titanium and the Sport. The Sport had certain blacked out elements, blacked out alloy wheels also, while the titanium retained all the chrome. And the two versions were, I think, 33 and 34 lakh rupees. So in 2020, it was a fair bit of money, but it was obviously competitive with the Fortuner. Engine noise is well contained thanks to a 10 mm offset crank design that minimizes the piston side load. This reduces the rubbing forces against the cylinder walls. There's always ample torque on tap, enough to hustle the ND to triple-digit speeds. And because of the ride and handling sophistication, you really could hold triple-digit speeds without a problem. The power delivery also is more refined, it's more linear. There's no sudden build-up of torque, there's no sudden surge, and no turbo lag either. Obviously, the 10-speed gearbox, it masks a lot of it. It always ensures that you are in the right gear. But this is a more sophisticated driving experience. This Endeavour was the very last update that Ford did. In fact, I think a week, 10 days before the press release came out, we had actually spied the EcoSport being tested, the updated facelifted EcoSport. And because Ford has a lot of fanboys on social media, that post had a lot of engagement. A lot of people were looking forward to the EcoSport coming back. And then a week, 10 days later, came that press release. Ford restructures India operations. Basically, Ford pulled out of India. So that was like a bolt from the blue, and that was that. End of story. The Endeavour ended up being the very last product update that they did, and Ford packed up and left. And as it turns out, not forever. And now there's news that the Endeavour won't even be called the Endeavour, it'll be called the Everest, because earlier one of the Indian manufacturers had the rights to the Everest name, but apparently they've let go of those rights, so Ford has the right to use the Everest name. So it's going to come back as the Everest. But what do you think? Should it be called the Endeavour or the Everest? Let us know in the comments. Personally, I think Ford should stick with the Endeavour name because that has more weight than the Ford badge itself. I could be wrong, but you let me know. A manufacturer pulling out of a country is a terrible event. Obviously, it sends a very bad message to the rest of the world, but also it really affects the existing car park. Second-hand values, they plummet. Who wants to buy a car from a manufacturer that's no longer active in your country? Except when Ford pulled out, the Endeavour values did not tank. That black Endeavour, the 2-liter with the 10-speed automatic, that kind of a bidding war on it. Everybody wanted their hands on the last Endeavour, knowing that there will not be another Endeavour made in India. That 3.2 white one, that was bought second-hand last year for around 24 lakh rupees. Today, 3.2 Endeavours are around 28-29 lakh rupees. That very Endeavour has got a standing offer of 30 lakh rupees. The Endeavour is an appreciating asset, and I don't have to remind you, Ford is not active in India. They still have their service centers who are doing a game job of keeping all these Endeavours running. And in fact, the Endeavour, it is reliable, it is tough, it is rugged, it has got good engines, got good space, it's got good comfort. We've talked about all of that. The Endeavour is still a very good SUV, and the brand name is so strong that people are excited about the Endeavour, or maybe the Everest, depending on what it's going to be called, is coming back to India. It'll come back as a CBU, that's what we know. CBU means it'll be priced at about 60-65 lakh rupees, maybe even 70 lakh rupees the ex-showroom. So it's going to be really expensive, yet people are ready to pay for it. The brand value is so strong that people are excited about it. And of course, the Fortuner prices being what they are, Ford can obviously move up prices of the Endeavour. But the Endeavour is coming back, and the brand is so strong that it can carry the weight of the Ford badge on its shoulders. A precedent like this, I haven't seen. And that's why I'm excited about the Endeavour/Everest coming back to India. What about you? Let us know in the comments, and thank you for watching this episode of Gone But Not Forgotten.